this subject of adult-child enmeshment. One of the ways in which this can be described is covert emotional enmeshment or abuse. Now, I've had several experiences with this, and it seems to be prevalent throughout our societies, usually with, in most cases, from my experience, but not exclusive to, mothers and sons. Now, the origin of this and the way in which it forms is usually through an unhappy marriage, when the father and mother tend to be breaking down intimately within their relationship, where the relationship's starting to deteriorate terribly, and for whatever reason, the duration of this unhappiness has lasted to the point where the adult turns to the child for emotional supply that should really only be supplied by the adult partner or husband or wife. Now, the consequences of this are dire, both for the parent and the child, particularly emotionally for the child, because now the child's being trained to think that it can be in an intimate, as it were, relationship with the adult, and it becomes incestuous. It becomes emotionally incestuous in the sense that the parent now is invited and allowed and programming the child to believe that it's the source, primary source of emotional supply for the parent, particularly the mother. And therefore the mother then surrogately replaces the husband or the father or the boyfriend or whoever the person is with the child, with the young male child. And what happens is the child now is put in a position where it believes, whether it be conscious or subconscious, that it's now responsible to meet the mother's emotional needs. Now, as this thing breeds after its conception and the child becomes aware that there is a place that it's being allowed into within the mother's emotions that it shouldn't be, the mother also has a sense of satisfaction and belonging that has gone beyond the boundaries of a mother and son relationship. Now, it's something that is so prevalent in modern society that it also almost seems like a natural way in which mother-son relationships should develop and evolve. But what I've seen from my experience over and over again, the consequences of this kind of co-mutual relationship, as it were, are dire. Now, once conceived, don't underestimate the fact that the child becomes aware and very interested in, and almost builds a lust after the ability to come into the emotional place within the parent that it doesn't belong. It becomes an attraction. It becomes a place in which a bent form of satisfaction in the guise of what would be explained to be concern or the relationship of parent-child that has crossed boundaries far enough up to, and sometimes beyond, the place of emotional incest. Now, emotional incest is not uncommon in modern society, and it's not something that's new either. And once you come into a relationship where this is taking place, you can find yourself entangled in some very interesting and unhealthy situations. What you'll find is the parent needs to either commit to you and give the child a sense of abandonment. I mean, it's very difficult for the parent now, once it's found another adult that it can share itself with, him or herself with, to be able to divide themselves between the new partner and the child in which it's developed this misaligned relationship with. And what happens is the dynamics are can be absolutely fierce, because now we have a child that's looking to the mother and saying, hang on a minute, you've allowed me to share that part of your life, and now you're sharing that with somebody else. Now, the parent doesn't think about these consequences at the time, because all they were interested in was building the so-called relationship with the adult child. Let's say adult child, because usually the formation of this happens over a series of years, where parents usually break up when their children are young teenagers, and the teenagers then find themselves in these situations, not conscious of it, of course, because they're programmed to think by nature of daily living that this is the normal way in which they are to grow up. And the bond between parent-child now becomes more than what it should be, and there's been permission for that to be able to happen, because both the mother's getting a need met through the new surrogate partner, which is the son, and the son's definitely aware that he's got some kind of need being met that's not normal or usual. There's some excitement that comes with this, because he's being allowed into the private life of the parent, a place that really children do not belong, but this is prevalent. Now, some of the ways in which this can be identified is there'll begin to be a tussle for time. Usually when you meet somebody, they'll give you your time and give you their time, and there'll be no interruptions, and things get juggled quite well. But as time goes by and the relationship's supposed to be developing, you start to find yourself entangled between this conflict between the parent and the child that has nothing to do with the parent being a parent or the child being a child. It's some kind of emotional enmeshment that's beyond the normal parent-child relationship. And when you become a spectator of this, it can become very alarming and very confusing, because you're trying to navigate a relationship with the adult who's now struggling to navigate a relationship with the child. And what you'll find is the child will start to pull at the adult at times where the new partner's about to turn up. Now, of course, the parent of the child is not going to be totally aware of this, because it's learned behaviour, it's trained behaviour, it's been programmed into the mother and son, or father-daughter, or whatever the case might be. It's been programmed into the relationship. And it can be identified very, very quickly. There'll be moods, there'll be accusations, there'll be imaginations covertly directed at the new partner. There'll be accusations. The accusations is jumping to conclusions that cannot be justified or made to be consolidated. They're usually based on reactions to emotions that are responding to the parent having a new partner. The other things can be bouts of sickness, emotional needs not being met by the parent, very vocally and verbally made known. There can be episodes of control, episodes of manipulation, and without conscience in front of the new partner. There can be, and you'll see the parent trying to divide themselves between the new partner and the child or adult child who's trying to say, what's going on here, as I had your attention up until this point and now you're taking it away from me. You're abandoning me. There's a sense of abandonment and a guilt that is tried to be, and shame projected upon the parent for having now replaced them with an adult from the outside. Terrible sense of abandonment on the child, who is now wondering where their supply is, because now the parent's trying to supply a new partner and drip feed the emotional incestual relationship that they've built with the child. And so you'll see the parent of this child begin to struggle within themselves, trying to find time in which they can give their full attention, and might I say, not parent-child attention that now needs to feed this new dysfunctional bond that they have at the exclusion of the new partner. Now, the new partner may not necessarily be aware of this at the conception of the relationship, but I can assure you it will surface, and it's very, very ugly if it's there. Some examples of myself have been incredible. I've seen young boys peel wallpaper off the walls in protest of the parent having a new relationship with a partner. I've seen young boy, 10 years old, have his mother pinned against the wall by the throat, and the mother able, if choosing to fix this problem via discipline, but the spell has been so strong that the child now has become the authority in the house, and the mother now is subject to that child based on a form of guilt or a form of submission that really should be forbidden for an adult to give to a child. A 10-year-old child with his mother pinned against the wall by the throat for not continuing to be submissive to that child. emotionally. It was one of the most horrible forms of dysfunction that I've ever seen. Tantrums are not uncommon. Emotional manipulation is not uncommon. Undermining the new partner covertly is not uncommon. The mother and the child sharing intimate details about the new relationship is not uncommon. It is a complete, total entanglement of dysfunction that is fed by a form of lust. It's not a normal relationship between an adult and child. It's a form of lust, and that lust has to be fed, and it's fed through covert incest, covert emotional incest. And if that incest isn't fed, then things start to shatter. The relationship between the parent and the child now has to be jeopardized, put into a place of jeopardy, or this relationship now is jeopardized. You're not playing your part. There becomes a struggle and a tussle, and there's only one person to blame, and that will be the new partner. Now, how does a parent, without boundaries, these boundaries, combat that without being contradictory to the child that needs their lust fulfilled, their emotional ancestral lust fulfilled? How does a parent manage that? Well, they try and divide their time, and somebody's going to pay, and usually the person that pays is the new partner. Now, this isn't evident at the start of a relationship. You come into the thing and you're plodding along, and then all of a sudden you're trying to understand what's actually going on here. And if you have no clue about covert emotional incest, it can become very, very jading. Your head starts to swim. You start to try and go along with the excuses of why this person isn't about. Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, I have this to do. Oh, I have that to do. This can also happen around substance abuse as well, where the adult wants to and needs to spend time with the substance of which they become accustomed to being involved in, at the exclusion of the partner who has needs. And let me say, if you're one of these partners and you found yourself in this kind of situation and your needs aren't being met, and there's red flags and alarm bells going off, and you're trying to find excuses for these not to be legitimate, I ask you to stop and question whether the legitimacy of these warning signs within you, where your needs are not being met as a consequence of another person's either dysfunctional enmeshment with a child or a substance. I need you to stop and ask yourself and search out the legitimacy of the feelings that you're experiencing, because these feelings aren't there for no reason. And it's not your job to cater for the negligence of somebody else due to their dysfunctions. You have to be real about this. You can't let your faithfulness and loyalty blind you from the situations that you're finding yourself confronted with. It's terrible when you start to see a parent and a child crossing the lines emotionally, and they have no concept that this is a part of a relationship that they've formed out of the breakdown of an adult relationship. Children are too readily made available by the parents through this covert manipulation of allowing the child to come into a place that they are fully aware of is private. And the temptation of this and the allurement, the mystery of this, again, I can only describe it as a lust for the child to come into this place, and the emotional exchanges, the subtle emotional lustful exchanges that are taking place during these exchanges in the adult child or young adult to parent relationship, it actually becomes addictive. And if this addiction isn't met, because now the parents sharing themselves with the new partner, then there is inevitably and predictably going to be consequences. And these consequences manifest in many different horrible ways in which somebody that's trying to have a relationship with this parent who's created a environment like this for themselves, and usually they'll tell you that, and that it's part of trying to meet some other kind of need like depression, or there's another, there are reasons for this. When you look deeper underneath the surface, the actual gist of the problem is the parents allow the child to build a lust, an emotional lust that needs to be fulfilled through this dysfunctional enmeshment between the parent and the child. And as an outsider, I'm telling you, you do not need to be subject to this. You need to protect yourself from this, because blood's thicker than water, and it doesn't matter how hard you try or how good you are, the lust between the child and the parent has to be fulfilled, or it's going to jeopardize the relationship. Somebody's going to kick up a fuss, and it's usually the child, because the child's now being put on the sideline while the parent's getting its needs met somewhere else, and that's going to cause terrible objection. And of course those objections will be aimed at who? The partner. They'll be aimed at the new partner who's now come along to try and fulfill the parent's needs. But the parent's made a rod for its back, because now it has to try and work out a way in which, without hurting anybody, which is an impossibility, to quench this lust within the relationship between that the parents developed with the child by allowing it into an adult space that it should never have been involved in, a surrogate partner space. And again, we have to come back to the abandonment and all the consequences of that in the child when the parent meets a partner. It's very complex, it's very abusive, and it's very destructive, and it can only be described as covert emotional incest. And in some cases it goes beyond this. You'll have children lying on the bed with the parent, and the parent will be holding them, or they'll be that close. You'll have parents calling their children babe or gorgeous, or names that you do not, names with intimacy connected to them and position connected to them that the child should never be subject to. It's only meeting a parent's need. Parent ignorant of itself, what it's doing to its own child. Oh, but it's all in the name of all sorts of things they can label it as. And I tell you, the next thing you'll find the parent discussing you with the child, and the child knows all this information about your private life that they have no right to know. And again, it's dysfunction on the part of the parent. But who does the parent turn to when their new relationship gets into trouble? Usually because of these kind of behaviours, these kind of relationships between themselves and the children. They turn to the children. They go back round in a circle. So by the time the partner's had enough of it, the family dynamic's back in its dysfunctional circulating position, which is the lust that's been built between the parent and the child. And we've now excluded the partner. This is how 9 times out of 10 it can end up. Because the conflict between the parent and the child becomes so great, it's not worth the angst. It's not worth the breakdown. And you need to be aware of this. You need to know these signs. You need to have the courage to say something just isn't right. No matter how well the picture's painted between the parent and the child, that everything is all right, but it's not all right. I can assure you it's not all right, and it's prevalent in our societies today, and you need to be aware of it. I'll end this talk.